Let's get to work with Dan Hodges, commentator at the Mail on Sunday. Afternoon to you, Dan. I know you wrote a lot about this at the time, obviously, and you continue to do so. I mean, this report, it's nearly 200 million quid. I accidentally said 2 million quid earlier. I mean, I couldn't have... If only it was 2 million quid. So nearly 200 million pounds. It's not even over yet as well, because there's more, there's another instalment still to come. Certainly yesterday, of course, a big headline grabber for a lot of what Baroness Hallett said. Give us your overview on what you made of it.
Well, I think it's an appropriate end, an appropriately shambolic end to what was an appropriately shambolic episode in our nation's history. I mean, it was quite clear to me, whilst the inquiry was proceeding, and I this isn't hindsight, I did say at the time that it was quite clear that the whole thing had effectively become a shambles, and we've seen that with the conclusions. I mean, I think you sort of, as you identified, that the inquiry seems to, on the one hand, literally be criticising the government for not locking down sooner, but simultaneously saying they could have lockdowns could have been avoided completely.
Yes, yeah.
But I mean, in all seriousness, the key thing for me that was evident as the inquiry was going on was that for some reason, and I generally don't understand the reason for this, those conducting the inquiry had decided to avoid what for me is the fundamental issue, which is obviously we were not prepared for a pandemic on that scale. But one of the fundamental problems was, it's quite clear that ministers, that if you remember, the big question was, and the big charge at the government was, were they ignoring the scientific advice? It's quite clear from everything we've read since that ministers were attempting to follow the scientific advice, but the scientific advice was either fundamentally wrong, fundamentally incomplete, and fundamentally contradictory. And that is a matter of public record. I mean, I have done it, others have done it. Everyone is able to do it. You can go back, because the famous SAGE minutes were published at the time. You can go back and look at the SAGE minutes, and you can literally look at what ministers were being told. And what they were being told by their professional advisors was wrong. Now, that's not necessarily criticism of the advisors, because this quite literally was turned out to be an exact science. But that key element of it, for me, is the most glaring omission from the report at all. There is no serious effort to scrutinise the fundamental problem, which was the scientific advice ministers, who are, after all, just politicians, they're not scientists themselves, that the advice given to the ministers was contradictory and was wrong.
And that in its, I mean, we've heard from Dominic Cummings over the years, who will always, given a chance, talk about this. But there's some elements of what he said that I did find interesting and very easy to believe, and that was a sort of the headless chicken scenario in Downing Street. They were running around and different people coming in, and Cummings thought he had some people who could supply answers, and you had SAGE over there and civil servants over there. The former head honcho, who was Matt Hancock's, essentially boss in some respects, the permanent secretary, now got an even more senior position. You had all of these elements to this, and it was, she described it as chaotic in the report, and it's not hard to understand when all of that is going out. I wonder whether the lockdown thing, Dan, was sort of the, in a way, that sort of anti-intellectual path of least resistance.
I think, to be honest, what the chaos that was described is basically the chaos that is replicated within government or with any large organisation at a time when an unprecedented crisis strikes. Now, what surprised me was I had assumed, and others had assumed, that sort of all of this had been modelled. There'd been a lot of training, a lot of preparation, because a major pandemic was very close to, if not at the top, of what you would describe as the risk register that governments prepared for. But as we saw, and remember, this wasn't these weren't just sort of failings here in the UK. They were failings that were replicated globally. This is basically just what happens when an event, a crisis of this nature strikes. And I mean, you mentioned Dom Cummings. I mean, I'm not his biggest fan, and he's certainly no fan of mine. But I did think, I mean, he put up a post this morning, which I actually thought was quite interesting and had some validity. And he did, he identified this fundamental problem. As I say, the contradictory advice, the chaotic organisation. For some reason, the inquiry decided to ignore that and basically point the finger at the politicians. I suppose because there was a sense they're an easy target, and obviously Cummings himself. I mean, this whole section about Downing Street was sort of infested with Dominic Cummings' sexism and misogyny, and that somehow had some impact on all this. It just seemed very, very strange and out of place, because this should have been a very serious inquiry, which had basically one function, to just simply learn the lessons in a practical sense, so that if this ever happens again, we know what we have to do. But I mean, frankly, it may as well, for all the validity it has, it may as well be thrown in the bin. I mean, it is. When you
sort of delve into it, it's almost like 800 pages long. I gave it a good go, Dan, but I couldn't quite make my way through it without gnawing off my own elbows, because it does go into areas that are either, kind of why are they even going there, which you just alluded to, and spectacularly omits the fact that politicians are the sort of the messenger in many respects. I never thought for one second that Matt Hancock was a qualified epidemiologist. I didn't think he was a qualified anything, to be honest, but I never considered him to be the oracle of Delphi on all of this that we've got to believe. It was quite clear whatever he was saying, whatever Boris was saying, whatever whether it was Dominic Raab or Priti Patel, whoever was giving those press conferences, were getting the information was coming from elsewhere, and that is largely omitted from this rather expensive report.
Well, exactly. And I mean, this criticism of Hancock and Boris and others, that they were, that in a sense they were presenting this over-optimistic picture to the country. What were they expected to do? What were they expected? Was Boris expected to turn up at those press conferences and say, "You're all doomed, you're all doomed"? Yeah. I mean, the reality is these are flawed people. We don't need to go through again to rehash Boris Johnson's flaws, Matt Hancock's flaws, the flaws of those around them. These were flawed people in exceptional circumstances, dealing with an exceptional, once in a generation crisis, and they in the system simply were not up to the task. But then, in a sense, it was never going to be up to the task. Now, all we can do, it seems to me, is attempt in a more sober way, try and learn the lessons, put contingencies in place, so that next time something like this happens, we are in a better position. But the reality is, at some point in the future, this will happen again. No doubt there will be similar chaos, because what will happen is people will try and implement lessons learned from this that aren't applicable to the new crisis that they find. But I do think, I mean, in terms of the sort of nature of these national inquiries that we've had, this is really close to one of the worst and certainly the most unprofessional in terms of its conclusions that I've ever had the misfortune to read. And I said only half jokingly yesterday, I think, I generally think we might need to have a national inquiry into how this national inquiry has been conducted.
Yeah, I thought that was a good line actually of yours. Yes.
The amount of money that's been spent, an incredible amount of money that's been spent on this, actually, for the outcomes that we've received is I think not value for money, to put it mildly.
I'd like to see the breakdown, like you get a hotel bill, with your breakdown of what it costs, how they got to £193 million. But maybe we can wait a little longer, and then we'll delve into those figures at a later date, perhaps. Dan, while you're with us, just a word, if you would, on Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. Lots coming out from her office this week, not always to the delight of some of those Labour backbenchers who are discombobulating by the moment. But she has, she's grasped this narrative. I don't know whether she can make it all work. And the latest thing we're hearing is about this kind of upping the amount of money you give to a migrant to voluntarily go back to their own country. I think it's about £3,000 right now. They've looked at the Danish model where those figures are far more generous. which could mean that you could get 20 or 30,000 quid based on the Danish model. They've not said that is the case. But, I mean, the optics of that would be terrible, even if, as Mahmood says, it actually works out cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the first point, I mean, she certainly had a very good week in a broader political sense, in finally looking like there is at least a minister within the government who gets the nature of the issue and is trying to grip it and do something about it. I think, again, you're absolutely right. I think this, putting up in lights will give you £30,000 to come home, to go home. I'm not entirely sure that is necessarily tackling what we're told are the big issues, which are the pull, supposedly the pull factors.
Yeah.
I personally wasn't impressed with the idea that we're going to change the rules for people who are already currently going through a process of trying to secure citizenship. As I said yesterday, if we want people to obey the rules and play by the rules, we can't stop. We've got to stop changing the rules, at least for those people who are already here. But I think in terms of the broader point, you touched on the backlash from the Labour Party. The reality is everything that is happening and being done within government now is being run through the prism of what is perceived to be the imminent leadership challenge to Keir Starmer and the leadership contest that will follow that. So what we will see in the next couple of weeks is an increasing backlash against Shabana Mahmood's policies from both inside and outside the cabinet, because the Labour colleagues are simply prepping themselves for the leadership election, which will basically be a popularity contest judged solely by Labour Party activists and Labour Party members who do not like this political narrative.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say on that point, Dan, I mean, you speak to ministers off the record. Is it that serious? There is going to be a leadership contest at some point.
There is going to be a leadership challenge against Keir Starmer at some point, I would expect next year. Yeah, definitely.
Would that be after May, those elections, or are we looking at even before?
May is currently the sort of the date everybody essentially has got penciled in.
Yeah.
Some people within the Labour Party are now saying it may need to take a little longer because some people are desperately trying to hope they can form some form of coronation, so they don't actually need a divisive contest. I think that it's unlikely they'll be able to unite around a single person, and always we have the issues of events. I mean, the reality is Keir Starmer has used up 8 of his 9 political lives. And were another major issue or political blunder or catastrophe to occur between now and May, at that point, I think those plotting against Starmer might move soon.
Yeah, spot on. Dan, thank you as ever. Dan Hodges is a commentator and, of course, journalist with The Mail on Sunday. Thank you to him.